Hi guys, this is Sasha. I am in my house, which is a very strange place for me to be throwing. I've never had a wheel at home before, but I'm super happy and grateful to have one that Still Life lent me, so that I could continue to make work at home and also make some demo videos. I know that a lot of people don't have a wheel at home right now, but what I'm hoping that this will do is just kind of get people excited to make work when they come back into the studio, and also just sort of give you some ideas for design and for process. So what I'm going to do today is I'm going to throw a large bowl. I don't have a scale at home, so I actually am guesstimating the weight of this, and I would say it's somewhere around 8 pounds, I think. The clay that I'm using is Rodspod from Aardvark, which is a really beautiful cone 10 super speckly clay, which I really love. And I'm going to sort of talk through the process, just because I think it might be sort of interesting for some people to hear it talked through. And then there's also a view from above so that you can kind of see into the bowl while I'm throwing it, and hopefully that'll sort of give you some insight too. So first thing is just the way I'm sitting. I'm going to sort of lock my knees into the splash pan surrounding the wheel, and I really use that to sort of anchor myself. As I'm throwing, I'm kind of pushing in with my knees in order to kind of lock my body in place. And that's because, some people who work at this scale have a lot of upper body strength and I don't, so I kind of need to use my sort of leverage and my whole body to kind of be able to control the clay. So I'm going to get the wheel going quite fast. Drizzle with water. And then the first thing I'm going to do is go in and use my right hand as a kind of lever to push the clay away and to squeeze back in with my left hand and to start bringing this up into a cone. One more time. All right, so this is still pretty wobbly. It's time to bring the cone down now. And the way that I do that, especially for larger amounts of clay like this, is I'm not going to push it straight down. I'm going to make a unit of my two hands and I'm going to kind of push it over and down. So it's going to kind of go down at a diagonal. And hopefully from the position that you guys, aka the camera, is set up in, you'll be able to see that really well. So I'm going to get the top of the cone to the middle of my right palm. I'm going to use my left hand to kind of control the motion and to push back against my right hand. And then with this amount of clay, what I'll often do is I'll kind of straighten my right arm to get the sort of leverage from the whole right side of my body. So it's curving over and I'm bringing it right on down. I'm going to do this whole process a couple more times. So I'm going to go in, squeeze it starting all the way from the bottom. My house is going to be a nightmare after this. Bring this guy down. Good. My bat is wobbling, which is fantastic. Let's see if the bolts need to be tightened. Yeah, they do. All right. Let's hope that works. So now I've combed it up and down a couple of times. I could keep doing that a couple more times to get it more centered. I tend to be fairly minimal in my coning, just because it does pull up a lot of grain. So every time I do it, I tend to sort of take it up less and less far. That's not a great way to say that. But the first cone that I make is quite tall, the second one is a little less tall, and then from there, I just kind of do more minimal cones. That sound you hear is the bat kind of not fitting that well onto this wheel. So unfortunately, it's pulling a little bit. Okay. Then the last thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go in and I'm going to kind of give it a push. It's not going to be a coning push, but I'm going to keep the piece low, and I'm going to get quite low, and I'm going to make this kind of lever, or I think of it as a snow shovel with my right hand because I'm from the East Coast, and I'm going to get my wrist all the way down onto the wheel head, and I'm just going to kind of push it from behind, sort of from like 6 o'clock toward 12 o'clock, just to get it that last little bit of the way centered. And I'm going to kind of ease off. I'm going to do a little bit of housekeeping, just clean up the wheel around the clay. And you'll notice that I'm starting with a pretty wide, low centered piece. That's because I want to make a bowl that has a lot of width to it, right? So a nice big kind of serving bowl. And for that, I want to start with an interior base that's really nice and wide, nice and flat, something that's going to allow me to kind of get the most use out of the amount of clay that I have. So I'm ready to open this guy up. The way that I open is using usually a combination of my left thumb and the middle 3 fingers of my right hand. So I'm kind of leading with my middle finger of my right hand and kind of tucking in these 2 fingers over it, not below it, but over it. And that creates a kind of nice natural V shape. So I'm kind of resting my hands against each other and just kind of pressing on down. And then the last little bit of the way, I'm just going to use my right hand. Okay. All right. I'm going to check the depth of my floor just to make sure. So I went a little bit too far down for this size of bowl. I would say that's about ½ an inch. That is okay if you do that. Don't despair. It's easy enough to fix. All you have to do is use the side of your finger to push a little bit of extra clay from the sides of the opening that you've just made back down into the bottom. And take a minute to just kind of make sure that it's well compressed, so that it doesn't kind of come up on you when you start opening it out further, but it should stay where you put it. And I hope this camera can kind of see what I'm doing. Okay, so now I'm ready to open out my hole and create the floor of my bowl. I tend to like really flat floors, really nice wide flat floors. I think that they functionally are really nice, and they also just kind of allow you to use the amount of clay that you have in the most effective way possible. So I'm going to open up a flat floor with just a tiny slight curve up on the sides. And the way I'm going to do that is my left hand is going to kind of act as a base. I'm going to rest my right hand on my left hand. And then again, I'm going to make this kind of little shovel out of these 4 fingers of my right hand. And I'm going to lead with my middle finger. And all I'm going to do is I'm going to pull that floor toward myself, just opening the bottom. The outer part is not going to change. The top part is not going to open at all. I'm just opening the bottom. So I'm kind of creating this little underground cave just by scraping at the bottom of the hole toward myself using the middle finger of my right hand. So I'm going to start doing that. My left hand is doing a super important job right now, which is to hold it steady and make sure that nothing else goes haywire, while I'm trying to do that. And I'm going to stop when I feel like this outer shape is about to really start bulging out, right? All I'm trying to do right now is to open up the floor. And the top opens up a little bit as well, but not a crazy amount. Okay, before I do anything else, I'm going to go in and I'm going to flatten my floor using a sponge, compress it. Make sure that it's nice and even. Okay. So before I start raising my walls, I'm going to do this nice little trick, which kind of evens out the walls before you actually go in and start pulling. And the way I do that is almost by creating little bookends with my 2 hands. So my left hand is going to go on the inside, somewhere right in this lower right quadrant, somewhere around 4 o'clock or 5 o'clock. I'm just going to hold the wall steady. With my right hand, you can either make a fist or you can just hold your hand flat. And I'm going to use this line of my right hand right down there by the wrist to kind of press into the clay, starting from the bottom and sort of coming up in one smooth motion to the lip. And the reason I'm using this line is just because you have a lot of power right there. And it's a nice kind of straight, strong, kind of bony area of your hand. And it just feels quite natural to go in, at least it feels natural to me, to go in and kind of compress using that part of my hand. You see how you start already getting quite a bit of height out of that. But the purpose of this move is not actually to create height, it's to even out the walls and to get them just a little bit thinner overall so that when you start pulling, your job is a little bit easier. Because pulling, as anyone who's thrown bigger pieces knows, pulling this much clay is challenging. All right. I usually do it 2 or 3 times. I'm going to sort of stop at 2 for this one. So this piece is slightly wobbly, as you can see. I'm going to blame that on the fact that the bat wasn't sort of holding steady. I should just be working directly on the wheel head because I'm at home and I can do that, but I'm still using a bat. So we'll just sort of see if we can work around it. My feeling about wobbles is that, you know, they come in degrees. If it's somewhere within like a, you know, if it's a small wobble, you just kind of work around it. And then at the end, what usually will happen if you're able to kind of work, you know, keep your hands really steady, is that whatever wobble you have will sort of transfer itself to the lip of your piece. And at the end, you can choose whether to cut it off